Good morning, everybody. I hope that this finds you well. Shall we do some Q&A? I think we shall do some Q&A. But first, briefly, let's talk about the two sponsors that are allowing me to continue to make this podcast. The first one, we're going to talk about sunglasses. My favorite sunglasses. The sunglasses I've been wearing for about a decade and a half at this point. That's right, we're talking about Gaiters. They're American-made, and they're American-made of all-metal construction. They come with a lifetime frame warranty, and there are a variety of frame styles. You have wrap. Before I talk about their styles, I break these down into your activity. And if you're going to do something that has wind, I would recommend their wrap style. And if you're going to do something that's more chill-based, maybe sitting by the side of some body of water, they have ones that are more lifestyle-based. That's going to be their Delta model. And, spoiler alert, they may have a new frame type coming out in the very near future. Similar to the Stark frame, but just not the same. Now, if you're into the details, there are some ANSI Z87 plus mil-spec ballistic rated Magnum and Spectre versions, and those are going to be more on the wrap side of the house. And I found this brand through skydiving. I was in the military at the time, but I found them through skydiving, and I was tired of having sunglasses just exit my face after I exited the aircraft. So I found Gaiters and actually never turned back. Wore them overseas, wore them CONUS, everywhere. And actually quite a few team guys do wear them. So don't worry, you're not actually a poser or trying to be something that you're not if you choose to wear Gaiters. You don't have to be in the military to do so. What I recommend is you go to Gaiters.com and check out their line of eye protection / sunglasses. And you're going to find that there are a variety of options. Pick one that suits your activities. This episode is also brought to you by Benchmade Knives. Let me just tell you, I love these knives, and I love that they're expanding their offering. They are, as a company, headquartered in Oregon City, Oregon, and they've been manufacturing high-quality cutlery for over 30 years. Benchmade takes great pride in the fact that they manufacture an heirloom product with the potential of being passed down from generation to generation with proper use and care. I don't know if there are that many things that you can actually say that about. Each of their knives carries a limited lifetime warranty and free sharpening and maintenance throughout the life of the knife. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but you can send your knife back to Benchmade, and they are going to dial that sucker back in for you. It might come back better than when you first got it. The company puts a strong emphasis on family values and tradition, encompassing the people and products that they create, and they offer a wide spectrum of product offerings that is continuing to expand. They cater to those in the hunting, tactical, outdoor survival, and EDC or everyday carry space. And what they just added is cutlery. Go to benchmade.com and check out what they have to offer. Right across the top, you're going to see it. They have the shop, customize, and then specifically cutlery. If you want to look at a lot of their other offerings, just hover over the shop icon and you're going to see it broken down from hunting, outdoor, rescue, survival, tactical. If you got some time, dive in and then take a look at what they can put on the dinner table / dinner preparation table. And that's it. Let's dive into Full Auto Friday, number 76.
Okay, I got the red smoke. Gun run, north and south, west of the smoke, west of the smoke. Okay, copy, west of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now. Come on with it, baby, give it to me, I need it. Get cleared hot. Copy, cleared hot.
Q&A, here we go. I have 4 questions selected for today. Different topics across all 4. Hopefully, these answers help somebody somewhere, at least the person, hopefully, that asked the question. But who really knows? But let's get into this. Here we go. Someone down here in Denver approached me the other day and asked me what a good veteran charity would be to hold a fundraiser for. I told her I had no clue, but I would try to find one that would be worth it. Eagles and Angels popped into my head because my wife and I were luckily able to meet Tom when I lived in Southern Pines, and he was extremely genuine and nice to us, even though we didn't know what he was really doing at the time. I would like to find another one that is veteran-based and actually legit. So let's talk about Tom and what he's got going on with Eagles and Angels first. I have donated, I wouldn't say quite a few, but a few uniforms at least, that span the later years of my military career and the earlier ones, and you can kind of judge that by the camouflage that we were being issued and were wearing. But what Tom has got going on at Eagles and Angels, and I'm going to paraphrase for him a little bit here, and he can feel free to correct me if I am not speaking properly about this, but what he's actually doing is preserving a bit of history. He is taking uniforms that people who served in the military, and he's had uniforms now, I believe, that spans everything all the way back to close to Black Hawk Down and everything forward from that across all 4 services or 5 services. Apologies to the Coast Guard. You guys are awesome and legit. Or maybe I was fucking with the Air Force and I left them out. Who knows? I actually don't know. I don't even know why I said 4 instead of 5. And the Space Force, I'm sorry, maybe I should say 6. I just don't know a damn thing about you. So for the 5 branches of the U.S. military. Individuals who served in the military are donating a piece of history, the uniforms that they wore, not only in the United States, but throughout the world, in some very important, informative actions, events, and theaters. And what Tom is doing, he's turning it into, I would want to say the term collectible item, even though I don't know if that's the right term. But I've seen everything from notebook covers to belt buckles to hats, and they all include a patch that is hand-cut and sewn that includes a piece of the military uniform underneath it. They look amazing. Tom is a dear friend of mine. He and I served together very briefly, all the way back in 2005. I was actually augmenting his command at the time. And before that, I had a deep respect for those individuals, and I left there with an even deeper respect for not only who Tom is, but what that community is all about and what they stand for. And I love what he's doing right now. So that has nothing to do with this question, but for people who are looking to be able to preserve a piece of history and actually own and possess a piece of that history, you need to check out Eagles and Angels. They're on Instagram. They have obviously a Facebook page and a website. Check them out for sure. Now, let's dive into the topic of veteran charities. Before I say anything, what I'm going to say is this. I'm extremely proud of my military service. I am thankful for anybody who has ever put their hand up and volunteered to serve for the benefit of others, above and beyond themselves, so that others would either not have to or to step into a breach that maybe others were not capable or willing to do. I have nothing but the utmost respect for military veterans. But what I will say is there is an ecosystem of professional veterans who look for organizations, and I'm going to use maybe a sloppy analogy and describe it as a Slurpee machine inside of a 7-Eleven, which I'm not even sure if that still exists, but it existed when I was growing up, and it was amazing. For some reason, I remember a Coca-Cola Slurpee. It was delightful. The point in saying that is when your cup ranneth empty, you could just go back and fill it back up. And I'm not recommending that anybody use that as a diet, but if you realized and got habituated to always going back and just filling it up from the same place, maybe you wouldn't necessarily do anything for yourself or look elsewhere. The vast majority of veterans are not anything like what I just described, but I would be remiss not to address the minority, which I often find to be more vocal than the majority, that lives in the ecosystem that, I don't know a better way to say this, but rewards the status of being a veteran and your military service. And there are pots of money and people with their hands out willing and able to give it. The charity and the giving world, when it comes to military charities specifically, the best advice that I can give people, because I get asked a version of this question relatively often, is to find something that would be near and dear to their heart, or that has some type of tie to maybe an individual or an organization that they feel drawn to. For me, in the DNA of my military career, obviously coming from the Navy Special Operations side of the house, that's near and dear to me, and that's why I have worked with the Navy SEAL Foundation. Now, in addition to having that community being near and dear to me now, and it will always be, the SEAL Foundation has an incredible rating when it comes to actually being a charity. And this is where people really need to take their time to do the research and determine to the best of your ability what percentage of your dollar that you are going to donate actually goes towards the services or programs that are promised. The last statistic that I saw was that there were over 40,000 service-based organizations that exist in this space that are willing to take your money and I am unsure what they are actually doing with it. And there are some issues. They're in the post 9/11 era. I'm not going to mention any specific brands, but let's just say there was a massive organization that had a pass-through rate of less than 10%, meaning that for every dollar that was actually donated, 10 cents or less was actually going towards the individuals, organizations, or programs that they were professing to help. And that's a problem. The SEAL Foundation has a great rating. They are incredibly transparent. They talk about the programs. They have people that they have helped actually come and talk about the programs themselves. That is what you need to find, and it's going to take some time. There are charlatans out there that will take your money and do nothing with it. I wish I couldn't say that, but I would be a liar if I didn't. So going back to what I initially said, if you come from a family, let's say you're a military brat family, or you have military in some extended family tree, maybe they're in the Army. Awesome. Get on the internet and find a charity that directly supports that community inside of the Army that they were serving with. I have a bunch of friends that were Special Forces soldiers, whether it's Mike Glover or Evan Hafer. I know, or Tim Kennedy. I know that there are organizations, I believe it's the Green Beret Foundation, that directly support that community. But I bet you there's one for airborne as well, or mechanized, or fill in the blank. So if you come from a Marine Corps family, awesome. Go find something that is supportive of the Marine Corps. The Air Force, the same thing. And you can see how we can tie this all together. So figure out what it is that is near and dear to your heart, and then just take the time to do the research. Because the worst thing that could happen would be for you to give money and somebody just takes it and does whatever they want to do. And out of 40,000 and above service-based organizations, I'm sorry, that's happening out there. Make sure that's not happening to your dollars. So I wish I could give you, this question is asking me a very specific question. I want to find another one that is veteran-based and is actually legit. Well, I could give you a few examples, but I don't only want to support those communities, because even though the communities that are near and dear to my heart, the military as a whole, if it's a wheel, there's so many spokes that allow it to work, and I want to see all of those communities represented and supported. So determine where you want your focus to go, and then do some research. And then stay engaged with the organization. If you make a donation, ask them if you can volunteer at one of their events. Ask them if you can volunteer at one of their outreach events, and maybe see exactly how your money is being spent. Question 2 is a two-parter. Has your combat experience made you any more or less afraid of death and or the process of dying? For whatever morbid reason, I somewhat often think about what those final moments of my life may be like, and can only imagine them being extremely uncomfortable. It has me wondering, though, if people who have seen a lot of other people's last few moments have a changed perspective from what they have before those experiences. It's an interesting question. I had to think about this one for a bit. I don't think I'm any more or less afraid of death or the process of dying. I think what I'm afraid of is not living my life to the fullest. I think that my experience in the military, which again was exceptionally average. And if you rate my military experience or exposure to these things in the first part of your question, sure, I saw more than some, but substantially less than most. But even in the exposure that I had, like I said, I think I'm more afraid of not living a fulfilled life than I am of actually dying. Because what changed for me was the realization in the fragility of life, how fragile life is and how quickly it can be lost. And there's a principle that I can break down into two parts that I really strive to use as a compass for where I direct my energy. And I've talked about this before on the podcast. Circle of influence, circle of concern. If you were to make two concentric circles, one of them would be a large, maybe a 10-inch in diameter, and the other one would be very small, 2-inch, and they sit on top of each other, right? So you have a little bullseye surrounded by a larger circle. The largest circle is going to be the circle of concern, the things that we spend our time worrying about. And I'm going to put death into that category. The circle of influence, though, is where you should spend most of your time because it's the only place where you actually have any level of control. You could worry about the weather. You could worry about the stock market. You could worry about a variety of things. You could worry about getting hit crossing the street, dying in a motorcycle accident, dying in a motor vehicle accident, whether or not you're going to get cancer, whether or not you're going to get COVID. Those are all very legitimate things to be concerned about. But you should probably ask yourself, how many of those things do you actually have any level of control over? And the more I've thought about this in my life, the place that I land is this. The only thing that I actually have total and complete control over in my life is myself, and specifically inside of that, my emotions and my thoughts, which I find to be pretty tied. I can let my thoughts drive my emotions downward, and I've also seen my emotions or the emotional state that I'm in, elevate my thoughts. It's a relationship that has to be maintained. So I don't spend a lot of time worrying about my death. I know that it's going to happen, and I want it to happen as far from today, sitting here talking into this microphone, as I possibly can have it happen. But my personal theory is that if you look at it as one race or one lap around a track and you're a car, I want to be the car that barely gets over the finish line and is bumped and bruised and the engine is completely blown out and the tires are completely smoked and I'm on my third transmission, as opposed to the car that easily slides around, but it has no dings, no blemishes, because it's never really been driven. That scares me more than the thought of death. I want to live a fulfilled life. I want to live a meaningful life. I want to live a life where after my life ends, and I think we all should probably recognize the fact that regardless of how short or long your life is, if it's 10 years or 100, if you look at it in the right lens, that's a blink of an eye for somebody somewhere. So we're not going to be here that long, but I would like to live a life that has an impact or a meaning that is still talked about after I'm gone. And maybe that's through my kids, but maybe I can bust my ass and try to improve the people around me or the world around me, which I think is largely why I enjoy doing this podcast. I get to have conversations about my mistakes and come to realizations about why I believe the things that I believe. And I'm only saying this based off of the feedback I get, is that it seems to help people make sense of their thoughts as well too. That, to me, I could not ask for anything more than that. And that level of meaningness or impact on people that I never even have the chance to meet. And that is what I want to do with my life. But that's only me. So I wish I could give you a broad answer that explains a lot of other people. I'd have to incorporate this into questions that I will ask people I used to serve with. And I'm actually going to, because it's an interesting question. Excuse me. And I'd be curious to hear what they have to say about it. I suspect, though, that it gives them more of a passion for life, a more of a passion for living, and a hard realization that it's fragile. That's what it does for me. Part 2. Maybe this one is too big for Fallout Friday, but I'll ask it anyway. I'm increasingly concerned about a war with or between other major players in the global political landscape and what the implications of that would be. How do you think we'd fare if we went to war with China, for example? I'm assuming things that made us so superior in Iraq and Afghanistan either wouldn't be available or give us much of an advantage anymore. What do you think would change at home, in parentheses, supply chains breaking, empty grocery stores, etc.? It's an interesting question. I've thought about this. When I first was in the military at Team 5, we were singularly focused on a potential war with North Korea. That's just what Team 5 focused on. And then obviously 9/11 changed that focus a little bit. I think China is a great example of this, and I do think there'd likely be an interruption of supply chain, but there'd also be a massive interruption of supply chain on their side of the house as well. There's a podcast that's going to be coming out in 2 weeks where I'm sitting down and talking about specifically agriculture and the amount of food that we actually send in the other direction. They might be kicking our ass when it comes to a production perspective, when electronics or manufacturing, but we're kicking their ass when it comes from an agricultural perspective, and we're exporting our ass off. So that's going to go both ways, the breaking the supply chains. Do I think there would be empty grocery stores? I don't know. I was overseas during Iraq and Afghanistan, and I don't know if the grocery stores were any more full or empty. as in comparison to the baseline. China would probably be a different example, right? Afghanistan and Iraq I would call third world at best. It's a chance that they actually fall into the fourth world or fifth, depending on where you're talking about in that country. But I'm less concerned with a direct interaction with China on a military superiority, and I'm far more concerned on the things that I'm sure both countries are doing behind the scenes. The cyber warfare, that's the term that I've heard described the most. Our reliance on electronics, our reliance upon, whether it's our cell phones or our computers or our networks, the more reliant you are upon that single point of failure, the more disruption is possible if that were to shut off. I don't think it takes a rocket surgeon to trace backwards that a lot of the attacks coming towards this country are probably coming from two places, from Russia and from China. And again, you're remiss to think that we probably as a country are not doing those things as well. And maybe that's what warfare looks like more in the modern era, but there's consequences to it. But I think there's consequences, again, on both of those sides. If it went kinetic, I don't have any doubt, whether it be China or Russia, that the United States would actually end up on top of that. But if it doesn't go kinetic, and we develop this incredible sense of reliance on things that people from tens of thousands of miles away can turn off with keystrokes, man, I don't know how that's going to look in the long term. And I think one of the best ways, if you look at that potential threat and you agree that there's that threat there, what can you do about it? There's a lesson to be learned in that hesitation or fear. And that lesson is become more self-reliant. Become your own first responder. And I don't need to say much about this because I've had Mike Glover on the podcast many times. He legitimately has an organization dedicated to helping people do those things. So go check out Fieldcraft Survival. Listen to people like Kevin Estella and Mike Glover. There's a reason that they talk the way that they do about the things that they do. And it doesn't solve these threats, but it would help you as an individual and then hopefully help you as an individual in a community ride the waves if something like that were to happen. Question 3. My observation question is this. What is the formula for entrepreneurship that a lot in the SO, which stands for Special Operations, this is an interesting one. I don't know. Well, actually, I do know, because SOF would be Special Operations Forces. That would be all the U.S. military special operations. When it says SO, that is actually a Navy rate, special operator, I think. I don't know. I've been out of the military for a while. But what they're talking about are SEALs. So what is the formula for entrepreneurship that a lot in the SEAL community seem to have? Yourself, Glover, Jocko, Evan, etc., all have it. I have a friend that served in the GWAT, Global War on Terror, in your former community, and he has the same entrepreneurial drive and is trying to grow his business as well. I see this, and it's commendable. Where does it come from? Well, let me just tell you. This is actually what we screen for in our selection process, and I bet you most special operations selection processes are screening exactly for this. And you're not screening for an entrepreneurial drive. What you are screening for are individuals that when they encounter adversity, they see it as motivation as opposed to being a roadblock. We're all going to encounter failure in life. I would say if you choose the path of an entrepreneur, you're probably going to encounter failure more than most. If you encounter that failure and you are unwilling or unable to move left or right or go over it or under it or around it or however you navigate that obstacle, and it becomes a barrier that you place in front of yourself, which is what is happening when you fail and you can't move on. You are placing that in front of yourself. You're not going to make it through a special operations selection course either. But if you can find a community of people that don't mind failure, trust me, they don't like it, they don't want it, but these are the type of people that you are going to have to kill before you can stop them achieving their goal. And their path to achieving their goal is not going to be an arrow line straight vector. It's going to be all over the place. The reason for that is as long as they're getting closer to their goal, they're not necessarily worried about that path. And like I said, you'd have to kill them to prevent them from achieving it. That's what you see in BUD students, to go back to the SEAL community. Tired, wet, hungry, sleep deprived, whatever it may be. I can try to play mental games with them, emotional games, physiological games with them, and regardless of what I throw at them, regardless of how much pain I can put them into, They simply look at it as a motivation or something that's not going to break them, and they just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Guess what? They get to graduation day, and they're successful inside of that community largely. Of course, not every selection there is not every selection process. There isn't a single selection process that is perfect, that doesn't have holes in it, and there are weeds in every lawn, regardless of the size. But the point is, if you select for that type of behavior, what you end up with is a community of people that behave that way. And eventually they'll time out of the military. They probably don't want to work for somebody else anymore. So becoming an entrepreneur looks very enticing to them. And then guess what? You're going to have to kill them to get them to not achieve their goals, regardless of how much failure that they encounter. And that's why you're seeing that in those individuals, because that's what they have in common. It's something that we teach, and it's something that we select for, and then something that you refine throughout a career. Just because you put up one uniform and put on a polo shirt instead, or whatever it may be, shorts and flip-flops and a T-shirt, none of that changes. And I think that's why that's a very common theme inside of the special operations community. Last question for today. Hello, Andy. I am 19 years old, and I need to seriously take a good assessment on what my career path will be moving forward. I'm going to reread that sentence for the individual that wrote this into me, because we're going to talk about this. I'm 19 years old, and I need to seriously take a good assessment of what my career path will be moving forward. And don't you worry, we will. When I was in 11th grade, I was the command master chief in my school's JROTC program, and all I ever wanted to do was go kick some doors and kick some ass in the Marine Corps. After being deemed unfit for service for medical reasons, I set my sights to the police force, but a serious car accident killed that opportunity for me. I now work in a small machine shop for some serious chump change. I love the company and the work I could possibly be doing. I went to my shop foreman about the possibility of advancing to run some of the machines and work on the cars. I was told I would be stepping on his toes. I understand his concern and treated the situation with respect, but since that conversation, he has done nothing but belittle me, undermine my work, and try to make me look as bad as possible to my boss. I don't want to be like my foreman, who is 45 with no social life, barely gets by, and borrows money from everyone. I've tried looking back to my old ROTC days to convert some of the principles of leadership and orders to the century to be the best follower as I attempt to be a great leader. But I was met with no avail. I need help before I'm stuck in this position and depend on my family for a living situation, to depend on this situation for my family's living situation. I hope you can help and give me some advice. I do have some advice for you, young man, and it's going to start with everything is going to be okay. This situation, you are 19 years old. Unless you are in a situation right now where you have other people desperately relying upon you, and I'll say maybe you have an extremely, a young wife and a child, or maybe you have elderly parents that are relying on you for your finances. If you are not in a situation where your back is against the corner, you have nothing but runway and opportunity in front of you. You will have options as long as you are willing to take them. Okay? What does it look like when you're not willing to take them? What it looks like when you're not willing to take options is when you will hear somebody talk about they're unhappy with their physical appearance or what they weigh. And they're talking about that as they are living a very passive lifestyle and eating Cheetos. Their fingers are legitimately stained orange from what it is that they're putting their fingers into a bag and then putting into their mouth. That is an example that I can draw from my own life that I have seen with my own eyes. Now, I have nothing against Cheetos. I actually think they're delicious. And if you want to make them the main staple in your life, if you're an adult male, that's your choice. And you should make that choice if you don't want to be able to see your dick when you're naked, standing up, looking down to take a leak into the toilet. That's how you would do that. If that's the choice that you want to make, I don't recommend it. I don't advocate for that. I'm not going to support you in doing that, but it's your life to live. But you can make a change before it gets to the point where you can't see your dick. What you have described, this is like my weird analogy at this point. And I'm just going to go with it. We're going with this analogy for the rest of this question. The foreman who's 45 with no social life, who barely gets by and borrows money from everybody, yeah, he can't see his dick. Right now, what you have is a little bit of orange on your fingers. And you're thinking about this like, man, if I keep eating these, that's going to be me, right? Dickless foreman. He's not really dickless. He just can't see it. God, I'm using this analogy every Friday going forward. It's always going to be your inability to see your dick. I apologize. I'm not saying that I'm mature. My driver's license might say that I'm 44, but I like what I like. Let's go back to your foreman. Oh, actually, let's go even deeper into the email. Why do you think it is that after that conversation, this individual has done nothing but belittle you, undermine your work, and try to make you look as bad as possible to your boss? Hopefully, in me highlighting that section, the person who wrote this is realizing that your foreman is very threatened by who you are and what you want to do. You're the young buck starting off, and you're already expressing the desire to expand your scope of work and responsibility. Now, he, regardless of where he is in his life and his inability or ability to get by, is probably very reliant upon his position. The last thing that he wants to see is for you to come in and him to be out of a job. So that shouldn't surprise you. And you could go back to the principles of leadership and the orders to the century all you want to, and it may not be the solution to this problem. You could try to develop a relationship and better rapport with this individual. You could just try to lead by example and let the work that they are allowing you to do to show who you are as a person, your work ethic, the preciseness of your work, the quality of work that you actually deliver. Or you could realize right now, because you know you don't want to be this person, that you could go and find a different job somewhere else and probably rapidly ascend beyond where the foreman even is or where you even think it's possible to be in 1, 3, 5, fill in the blank number of years. I'm very sorry to hear that you weren't able to serve in the military or that you weren't able to go to the LEO route, but that's okay. That's 2 options out of, I'm not going to say an unlimited amount because there's obviously a finite number of jobs available, but it's 2 out of many. And you're going to be able to find a job where you have empowerment, where you feel fulfilled, and then also that ability to financially provide for yourself to start with, right? Let's make sure you can provide for yourself. And then you can start, looking at expanding your loved ones or help wherever you would want to. And it still all goes back to the fact that you're 19 years old. For anybody listening to this who is under 20 and they are seriously concerned about their career path or they don't know who they want to become or what it is that they want to do, my only advice to you is it's okay. The only way that you could make that situation worse is to apply unnecessary pressure and think that you have to have it figured out right now or in 6 months or in a year. And I'm not saying sit in front of a video game console and play video games for 6 months or a year. It's okay to have a job and not know what you want to do with your life. Probably less okay to do that at 50, but at under 20, you have runway. You have options. You have latitude. So take a deep breath. And if you have people that are telling you that you have to have it figured out and you have to know what you're doing right now, just ask them politely to take a step back and fuck their own face because you don't need that type of pressure. I am still trying to figure out what it is I want to do with my life. I've identified what I don't want to do with my life, and that was a start for me. But I am taking opportunities. I've reinvented myself 4 or 5 times in my lifetime. I'm sure there will be more on top of that, and that's okay. That ties right back to my lap around the racetrack and barely getting across the finish line because I need to fail. I have to fail. If I never fail in anything that I am doing, I am not trying hard enough. And what I find is that the age, as it ticks along on a calendar, on your driver's license, people become more resistant to risk. You're at a point right now where you can absorb almost any type of risk, unless, of course, you fall into the categories I talked about in the beginning. But remember that. Be better than the foreman. That may not be possible where you work. And a career, don't focus so much on your career right now unless you have to. Maybe focus on your job, making ends meet, putting food on the table. And from there, you can find out what you actually want to do with your time. That's all I got for this Friday. See you guys next week.
West bank of the river. That's A-firm, west bank, and give me hell. He'll give it to me in the grove. the north. I've got the west bank of the river. Two's going to give it to you in the grove. Roger. Give me that gun run. Right along that bag, baby.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Thanks for taking the time to tune in, whether you're listening on an audio-only platform or you're watching on YouTube. I appreciate that you take the time every week to tune in. People ask me a lot, what can they do to help me spread the word? And the answer is actually embedded in the question. The biggest thing you guys can do to help me, if you enjoy the podcast and you think it would be helpful to others, is subscribe and share it with other people. And if you have the time, go on to Apple Podcasts and leave me a rating and a review. If you think the podcast sucks, tell me it sucks and leave a 0-star review or the lowest stars possible. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion, you can go to clearedhotpodcast.com. And there is a contact me button right there, which will land in my inbox. And the last thing, if people are interested in helping out, what you can do is fly the old flag. And by that, I don't mean an actual flag, because I don't have any of those. I'm talking about t-shirts or sweatshirts or hats, whatever it may be. Again, clearedhotpodcast.com. Click on the shop tab, and hopefully something in there looks like it would be an item you would like to wear around town. And then you can tell people what it is when they ask you. But that is it. The biggest thing I can say is thank you. I truly appreciate it. And until next time, see you.